This is Station Echo. Final report. Earth is no longer habitable. Repeat. Earth is gone. The screen glitches, then cuts to black. The winds didn't howl. They simply stopped. The skies didn't burst into flame. They dulled, turning an ashen gray, day after day, until sunlight became a memory. Crops withered not because of sudden catastrophe, but from a subtle shift, too much heat, too little water, a slow poisoning of the soil. And in the silence, Earth began to die, not with a bang but a retreat. Humanity didn't notice at first. We were too distracted, too digital, too distant from the soil we came from. But the signs were there. Riverbeds cracked and split. Birds no longer returned to northern skies. Entire species vanished like whispers in the night. When the bees died, a few people rang the alarm. But by then, the food system had already begun collapsing. Then came the red storms, superstorms that blotted out entire cities in walls of dust and lightning, born from climate systems we no longer understood. Within months, hundreds of millions were displaced, not by war, not by disease, but by the simple fact that Earth no longer wanted us. Oxygen levels declined in megacities. Entire regions became uninhabitable, branded red zones, walled off, silence. Yet still, news anchors smiled. Governments promised hope. The Global Climate Task Force released carefully curated updates, assuring recovery plans were in motion. But leaked documents told another story. The real tipping point came years earlier. Satellite data showed a sudden shift in the jet stream 1 that scientists believed irreversible. The oceans, too acidic to host life, began exhaling methane pockets, heating the planet faster than anyone had modeled. Secret geoengineering programs were launched to cool the skies. They failed silently and fatally. Worse, they may have accelerated the collapse. Then came the disappearances. Entire research stations in the Arctic stopped sending updates. A black zone emerged over Siberia, no data, no life signals. The whispers began. Some said it was natural evolution. Others suspected a planetary intelligence waking up in defense. The truth never made it to the public. Only whispers. And when the first mass migration order was issued, it wasn't a global call to action. It was an invitation, and only the chosen few received it. Private corporations, military leaders, AI elites. They were already building something far from Earth's touch. Domes on the moon, tunnels beneath Mars, and massive off-world arcs orbiting in cold silence. The rest were told to stay calm, conserve resources, pray. Earth didn't scream. She whispered. And we, distracted and self-absorbed, ignored her until she fell silent completely. Then, for the first time in human history, we heard the emptiness. No birds, no bees, no breeze. Just a question. If Earth no longer sustains life, was it us who failed her, or was she finally rejecting a parasite that never listened? The rockets didn't look like salvation. They looked like escape pods, sterile, silent, and only half full. When the Earth issued its quiet death sentence, not everyone was offered a seat. Project Second Sky had been whispered about for years in closed circles and evacuation plan, disguised as space colonization initiatives. But when it finally activated, it wasn't the sick, the desperate, or the brilliant who were chosen. It was those who had funded the plan all along. The rest watched from collapsing cities, eyes raised to the smoky skies, as streaks of fire marked humanity's departure. The Moon Dome was the first to receive inhabitants. A buried installation beneath the lunar surface, once a military listening post, had been transformed into a sanctuary. But life beneath regolith and stone was not what the brochures promised. The lighting systems glitched. Gravity felt like a dream you couldn't quite wake from. Worst of all was the silence. No weather, no air movement, just a hum of recycled oxygen and the weight of isolation. People began to unravel. There were suicides. Then came the restructuring. AI was handed more control. Emotions became inefficiencies. Dissent was met with sedation. On Mars, a different struggle unfolded. The underground habitats were functional, but primitive, Temperature swung wildly. Resources were strictly rationed. The leadership, a coalition of former CEOs and generals, imposed order with algorithms and armed drones. Rumors spread of utility scores, a system that measured each person's value to the colony. Low scores didn't just mean less food. They meant removal. No one ever saw those people again. But the most mysterious of all was the spiral, a massive artificial structure drifting in the asteroid belt. Funded by the private conglomerate known only as the Vault, it wasn't on any official map. Yet stories about it spread like digital ghosts. Some said it was paradise, a rotating haven of simulated Earth environments. Others claimed it was a prison, a behavioral experiment masquerading as utopia, where minds were monitored and rewired without consent. What made the spiral so terrifying wasn't just the rumors, it was that no messages ever returned from it. Only one encrypted signal was ever intercepted, filled with distorted voices repeating the phrase, "We are not who we were." Humanity had survived the fall of Earth, but something essential had been lost in transit. Connection, freedom, truth. New laws were written without debate. Digital credits replaced citizenship. Names became data strings. And through it all, people wondered, had they left Earth, or just recreated its worst systems elsewhere, colder and more controlled? The stars had opened, yes, but so had 1,000 new ways to be trapped. And behind every corridor, every module, every synthetic sunrise, a single question loomed. Was this survival or surrender? It came without warning, just a flicker of static in the deep space communications array aboard lunar base Echo. At first, they dismissed it as background noise, a phantom echo lost in the radiation storms between Earth and the colonies. But then the signal repeated, not once, not twice, 13 times, exactly the same. The voice was human, but distorted, submerged in interference. 3 words, over and over. The core heals. No one wanted to believe it. Earth had been silent for decades, classified as irrecoverable. Every transmission, every satellite feed, every drone sent back to investigate had returned corrupted or not at all. The official narrative had been clear. Earth was dead, toxic, and unsalvageable. But this signal shattered that certainty. Suddenly, silence wasn't confirmation. It was a cover. A secret council convened aboard the Martian stronghold. Leaders argued, was it a trap, a malfunction, or a signal from survivors who had never left? Most voted to ignore it. There was too much to lose. But a small group of dissenters, rogue scientists, and exiles from the spiral decided otherwise. They hijacked an old terraforming shuttle, retrofitted it, and launched without permission. Destination: Earth. What they found defied every expectation. From orbit, the planet still looked scarred, oceans bloated, continents restructured, atmospheric haze lingering. But there were signs of rebirth. Forests blooming where no vegetation had existed for years. Green pulses on heat maps showing biosphere activity. Strange, almost symmetrical patterns forming in previously dead regions, as if Earth was healing itself, not through human intervention, but through some force entirely its own. They landed in what was once Eastern Africa, now a lush expanse of emerald and glassy water. The air was breathable. The ground, warm and rich with microbial life. But there was something else. Structures, not ruins, not buildings. Formations organic, crystalline, humming with low-frequency vibrations. They seemed grown rather than built. Inside one, they found the transmitter. It was embedded in a tree-like column of mineral and root, still pulsing with energy. Then the dreams began. Shared hallucinations among the crew, visions of Earth as a living entity, not metaphorically, but literally. A planet that had watched, listened, and endured. One that had finally decided to reset, not just environmentally, but intelligently. The message, they now believed, was a test. Were we ready to return? Or will we repeat the mistakes that nearly killed her? They broadcasted a new signal back to the colonies. A warning and an invitation. Earth was not gone. But she was not the same. And to return would mean abandoning everything. The off-world colonies had become hierarchies, surveillance, synthetic lives. It would mean confronting the consequences of what had been done and accepting a world no longer ruled by human dominance, but by balance. Most in the colonies chose silence. The transmission was buried, labeled as misinformation. But for those who had touched Earth again, one truth echoed louder than the stars. She never died. She waited. And now she decides who comes home.